All right, so for a couple more steps today, we're going to need 2 of the M38 countersunk screws, 2 of our M3 nuts. You're going to need your rear wing, which hopefully yours looks way better than this, and then the rain light and diffuser along with the whole assembly you've had so far. Now I did have these ones in clear, which I'll actually swap out later, but I'm going to keep with these different colored ones just so it's a little clearer as to where they go. So a few quick things. Hopefully there's not too much on your rain light and diffuser, but things you may or may not have noticed that you'll notice later. This was a really poorly printed because there weren't the supports quite where I wanted them to be. But if you've got your knife or something else, if there's kind of these extra things on, you can go ahead and either use your knife to cut them off, or if you've got a flush cutters, usually you can cut them pretty close and it'll work pretty well. Another thing is if you do have a heat gun. Now I haven't actually tried a hair dryer. Hair dryer is basically a heat gun that doesn't get quite as hot. So if you do get a heat gun, I definitely would not use that as a hair dryer because they do get way hotter and you will burn yourself. But for some of these kind of wispy things, you may be able to just kind of run a heat gun over it. Make sure you're not holding it yourself because, well, that heat is going to get under your hand. But certainly you might set it down and kind of do your heat gun over and they'll go away. But a lot of them you can just kind of cut off. And so I know this isn't going to look the greatest because as we noticed, it didn't print super well, but I'm going to replace this with the clear, or the natural, I should say, the natural rain light and diffuser that's sort of clear later anyway. But I'm going to just clean it up a little bit so it looks a little bit better. And other things to keep note on are here, notice that it did try to print some supports inside those holes, and so that's another thing to kind of watch out for, especially if that's somewhere that you're going to need to put a screw through or a nut through. So just be careful. Once again, remember, if you're using this, you should have your safety glasses on and don't stab yourself in the process. I guess I could have cut more there. So can I just cut? I don't know if you see all those wispy pieces, but yours may or may not look better than that. Hopefully yours looks way better than that. But the nice thing about a heat gun is, especially if they're like really, really thin, it just kind of melts them, and then it almost is like they disappear. Technically, no, they don't completely disappear, but they kind of ball up, and since they start pretty small to begin with, you really don't notice them. So that is one option if you want to try to get some of the wispy pieces off. All right, so you'll need that rear wing. You'll need the rain light and diffuser. You'll need this. So where this goes is in the back, but really this piece is going to go on first. So this will go here, and then that rain light and diffuser will go on top there. So if I kind of hold it up, hopefully it will focus. Maybe not so much. I'll have to pull this up. So notice how it's this, then the rear wing, and then the rain light and diffuser. So that's the order. Okay, now on the rain light and diffuser, notice that you've got 2 spots for your nuts. So one will go on one side, the other will go on the other side. Now this one, I think unlike my other ones, isn't going in quite as nicely. Maybe I just need to put it straighter. or maybe I just need to kind of pull it in. So yeah, I'm gonna just try to pull that in. So I'm going to do the method I used before and start to screw it in until I can pull it all the way in. Again. There it is. So all right. So make sure that's lining up. Now remember, I'm just doing this to kind of pre get it in. And so nice thing here is now that's actually kind of set in there. So if I push it upside down, it actually isn't going to fall out. So if you have a hard time kind of just getting it in and getting it to stay, that may be able to pull it in. Just remember that you'll have to take that screw back out, but I think it's worth it because it pulls it in and you don't have to mess with it later. Maybe a little tricky now, but I'd rather do it now while I only have one piece that I'm dealing with than trying to hold 3 pieces together and do it. So we'll get this where it needs to be. Make sure it's rotated to go into the correct gap. All right, so there it's in. So again, this is kind of nice because they won't fall out. So let's then put that on the back here. So you'll pull back a little bit. All right, so we have, once again, this, and then the rain light and diffuser, or not rain, the rear wing, and then the rain light and diffuser. So keep in mind that this is like a rear exhaust, although it's really, I believe it's lights, but I could be completely wrong. I obviously don't know a ton about F1 racing, or F1 cars, and so it might be easiest to set it upside down, maybe not. If you don't have the nuts in there so that it holds, it definitely would not be easiest to do that. But although if you have another way to hold those nuts, that might be a good option if you can hold the nuts in place. All right, so keep in mind that sometimes you're threading through the plastic first, which is fine, and then you'll eventually get back to threading in the nut. So, and as you go, just make sure it's still lined up. As you go, and it looks like, well, it's not actually all the way through yet. Oh. So there, it just kind of started to get through. I'll let it poke through a little bit more, and then get this side in. So make sure you get it lined up. Now, if the rear wing is a little crooked to start with, that's okay, because the biggest thing right now is just getting that back part on. There. All right. Oop. So now it's not screwed in all the way, although it looks like it might be screwed in almost all the way. That's okay because it gives me some flexibility to line up the other side. So put that in, make sure it lines up. Once it kind of gets through, kind of make sure that nut is lined up. And I can screw it in all the way. Okay, so this is another one where you don't want to like screw it as hard as possible, but screw it far enough so that it is tight. Okay, and part of the thing to be able to tell is, are those all the way together? So that side looks pretty close. This side just a tiny bit of a gap, so not too much more. Oop. Not quite sure what that looks like. It's not actually threading in, which is why that click was happening. So I'm going to unscrew this, and then this time I'm going to hold this. Guessing it just wasn't quite lined up. And this might be another time where maybe you grab the longer screw to kind of make sure it gets exactly where it needs to go and that it does thread in. And then from there we go. All right, so there's our rain light and diffuser with our rear wing.